Hi, today I would like to talk about how you can use Angular 2 observables versus the promises. So for that, basically, I have an app which I've already covered to show how you can use HTTP with it. And I'm just going to kind of use that as an example and kind of walk us through that. So basically, in the service itself, I'm calling service get users and it's returning a promise. And I'm just using the normal promise protocol that when there is a success, I just have this little function. And this function, what it is doing is converting the parameter we got users into JSON and assigns it to the available users. And we are essentially displaying the users. So in the actual protocol and the service, basically what you used was this .http get, and I'm getting it from a remote service, and I changed it to promise. So let's say you didn't want to deal with promises. Basically, as you know, for promise, there are two situations where the promise succeeds or it fails, the resolve and the reject case. And so if you didn't want to use promises and you say you wanted to kind of go through the observers, what you can do is just remove this thing here and you say, and let's see what happens. If you just do this, it's returning an observable. So if I look in my component right now it's going to complain that get users is returning an observable. And obviously I cannot use the then, which is really the syntax for the promise. So the thing to do with observables is you can find out what you can do with observables. Typically you would want to do subscribe. So here is a function method that's available on the thing. So we subscribe, and if when you subscribe, you can see there are essentially there are three functions you can provide in a generic case when you are subscribing to an observable. The next observer is essentially when you get a value, you want that method to be called. So that's the first function. If there's an error, you can call the error method to be called. And this is actually quite similar to the promise. The only thing is that the next method could be called multiple times if you continue to get multiple values from a stream. And in a promise, it's only really just once. Either you get a success or your reject case. So that's one of the primary differences when you're using observers. So you can specify a next observer, an error observer, and also a completion observer. When that it's completely done, it'll call a completion method. So in this case, I want to just keep the method similar to what we had essentially. So we are just going to specify the next method here in the observer. And so now it's being changed essentially to use observers instead of doing the promise. And let's say if it works, and you can see the app still works. So this is actually a pretty interesting, easy way to do this thing. So what I'm going to do right now is essentially remove my internet connection for a second and simulate a situation where we get a failure. So if I go in here and see, you can see now we're not getting anything, and that is because I removed my internet connection and we have a failure. So to resolve or try to address this situation with an API, observables is actually pretty easy. What you can do is you can add a method called retry when, and it's actually not available right now. So what I'm going to do is import it, and just bear with me for a second, and issued guy, and it should say retry, and it's going to essentially retry this method, and it should be essentially, you can see it's starting to retry it. And now I'm going to put my internet connection back. Bear with me for a second. All right, I have my internet connection back, and let's see if the observable can retry. And here you can see that it retried several times and then it ultimately succeeded on its own. So this is actually a pretty easy way to do this. And you can specify a various count for it, or you can also specify what is called retry when. So observable do make it actually pretty easy to do this, and you would have to really need a complicated custom code to be able to do this. So I would recommend reading a little bit more about uh, observables. And thank you for watching this short screencast. And if you want to know more, I'm going to add this to my website under Angular 2 observables versus promise. Thank you.